I purchased my van on credit in 2015, it was not cool to live in a van. Over the past 5 years, I've seen vans go from creepy Uncle Rico down by the river references to grazing the front of REI catalogs. I see water pumps, pour-over coffees, pets, and beautiful people who look like they just showered, all warmed by a diesel heater in a van that costs more than a down payment on a house. This was not my experience. But don't misinterpret me, I wish it was. But I was dirtbagging on the streets of North Hollywood in a cargo van smaller than your mom's minivan, all while living in debt for the first time in my life. It was not graceful. So, did you see it back there? There goes my Honda Civic. I just sold it. Now I have my van, and I'm going to be living in that. I was building my van with my friend Ziggy, or more truthfully, when I was filming him building my van. I was still filled with doubt that I had made the wrong decision. But I didn't have any other option. Since the beginning, living in a van was not a plan to get ahead. It was a plan to stay afloat while I tried to get in the film industry. I needed to be in Los Angeles, one of the most expensive cities in the United States, the entertainment mecca of the world. But I was running out of money. There was no way around it. Living in a van was my only hope. So on the 150-inch wheelbase of a Nissan NV200, we built my life. We, and by we, I mean Ziggy, built a 6'4" bed for my 6'2" body. Under the bed, we built storage for my clothing and a 12-volt, 300-amp-hour battery and inverter system. We also built a cabinet that worked both as a kitchen, living room, and work area. One pleasant surprise we learned while building the van was that one of the best features of the NV200 was that the passenger seat bolts that hold the chair to the frame are perpendicular. This allowed us to reverse the passenger seat to create a living space next to the bed without any third-party modifications, aka without spending any additional money. My favorite part of the entire build was that Ziggy came up with a way to mount a 280-watt residential solar panel to the roof of the van, all off the standard roof mounts that would keep the van incognito and allow me to park in any and all parking structures in LA without an issue. Ziggy was a genius in everyday life. I would have never been able to live in a van without his ability to take my crazy idea and help me turn it into a reality. We built the van in 3 days, kept it as bare minimal as possible, not because I'm a minimalist. I'm probably as far as you can get from one if we're being realistic. But we built it in 3 days because I didn't have much money, and I had pushed my procrastination to the limit. I didn't have a place to sleep at night, so we had to finish this van quick. My original plan was to live in the van for a year, because that would be the point at which my ROI would go from negative to net zero. I considered my van my Los Angeles studio apartment, but on wheels. Because to rent a studio apartment with utilities in LA will cost about $20,000 a year. That was the same amount I spent on buying my van. The difference was, at the end of a 1-year studio lease, you have nothing but a stack of receipts. At the end of living in a van, I would still have $15,000 in equity. During my first few months in the van, I learned a valuable lesson. I learned exactly how long a 24-hour day can be when you have nothing to do and your car is your home. I learned very quickly that this van was not a Los Angeles studio apartment that I would enjoy lazy Sundays at and where I'd be able to use the bathroom whenever my body called for it. I learned I had to be very deliberate with my actions and that I now always had to have a plan. I could no longer just hang out. This was great because all my life I've struggled with hanging out. I love to relax. I love to never leave my house. I love to never clean my house. And on most days, I prefer to not get dressed, including today. But living in a van forced me to get up and get out. So I began to ride the metro around LA and go to college campuses to have a little space to stretch my legs. Now, this was a turning point in my life. When I dropped out of college, the last place on earth I ever wanted to see again was a college campus. I hated college so much that I changed my major so that a majority of my classes were closer to my favorite parking structure that was conveniently located right next to the freeway on-ramp. Oh yeah, I was committed, just in the wrong manner. But now, I was willfully spending 8 to 12 hours a day on college campuses around LA because I had nowhere else to go. I began to fall in love with the college environment. I fell in love with the architecture of places like Caltech, the empty classrooms of USC, and the beautiful landscapes at places like Art Center in Pasadena. I loved that I could throw on a backpack and slip into the crowds. I could escape from the van and from my reality. After 21 times around the sun, I felt that I was starting to live my truth. I felt that I was finally becoming who I was supposed to be, and I was falling in love with the life in which I was leading. I felt empowered and encouraged to do more, all because I had my van. I had a sense of safety in my life that I'd never had before, all because I had successfully created for myself an environment in which I felt in control. My van was my fortress of solitude. Now, at this time, without a doubt, I was feeling myself. But I couldn't ignore that my unemployment was still eating me alive. Not only in my bank account, but mentally, I was at war. All this time, I'd been working away at trying to be employed in the entertainment industry, but I was still only working a few days a month. I feared that I would never get a solid footing in the overcrowded industry, that I would be good enough compared to these professionals who had generations of experience on me, that I would forever be an imposter in comparison to them. But what was stronger than my imposter syndrome was my fear of failure, my fear of never being able to move out of this van, fear that I'd made the biggest mistake of my financial career by buying this van on credit and that I would never be able to pay it off, that I should have stayed in college, that I should have a serious lady friend and a degree by now, that I should be worried about a pension and my lack of health care. I live in a van, dirtbagging on the streets of North Hollywood, yet I'm claiming this is my truth? What am I doing? But this was my reality. There was no way around it. The only way I was going to get past this was to get through it. So I started using my fear of failure and of being an imposter to fuel my motivation to get a job in Hollywood. That meant I had to put in the work. Now that sounds great and all, but how am I supposed to put in the work if no one is willing to hire me? I'm sitting in a van without a degree, I have no real skills to speak of, and I'm brand spanking new to the film industry. At this time, even if I was hiring people, I wouldn't have hired myself. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I picked up my Los Angeles library card and logged back into my free version of lynda.com. And I dove back into learning how to use a color grading program by Blackmagic Design called DaVinci Resolve. This was the same program that I used to spend hours learning back when I lived in my West Hollywood apartment and was first treating cameras like a full-time job, back before everything changed due to the fender bender in the value package. The difference this time in the van was that while I was busy in Louisiana making $7.25 an hour, Blackmagic had expanded DaVinci Resolve to now include an audio mixer and a non-linear editor. This meant that the program that I knew so well for color could now be used to create movies from raw video files to a completed project without ever leaving the program. This was and continues to be a game changer for how movies can be made. Apart from the few days a month that I work on a film set, I spent the rest of my time learning DaVinci Resolve. I was all over lynda.com, YouTube, and any color grading forum I could find. I wanted to learn, and boy was I now maximizing these 24 hours in the van. But with learning anything, you hit a wall in which the next step requires you to go from practicing to playing the actual game. You have to mess up and fail, yet learn to stand up again and do it over and over. This has always been the hardest step for me. At the time, I was learning DaVinci Resolve because I had the time, and specifically so I could use it later down the road in my career. I was not learning it to use now. But why not start using it now? Why do I have to wait? I have not come this far and risked the trajectory of my life so that I could wait. Why shouldn't I play the game? Why shouldn't I make something? I had no clue what to make a video about, so I made a video about the thoughts that I couldn't get out of my head. At the time, I was struggling with being present and living in the moment. I was busy dreaming about my future past the van, where I'd have a studio apartment with no roommates. But that dream was by no means guaranteed to come. So I took that thought and made a video called Can I Live in the Moment? I was so proud of this video. I loved the cinematography, the color grading. I loved that my face was not in it at all. I cut it all out in that non-linear editor. By making that video, by playing the game, I learned so much not only about DaVinci Resolve, but about myself. I was so proud of the final product that I decided to put it online. Even though no one watched it, I considered it a huge success. So I decided to make another video. In fact, I decided to commit myself to making a video every week that I was unemployed. First and foremost, so I could stay sane, but also so I could make myself better than I was yesterday. All while learning a skill that would directly help me in my personal life by helping me reflect on my life, and in my professional life by learning DaVinci Resolve. So every week I made a video. and labeled it by the week of unemployment that I was on. I only made it to 15 weeks before I fell off, but I fell off because I got a full-time job on a union TV show. My first full-time job on a union TV show. All because I was in Los Angeles, living in the van and available to work when the phone rang. I was now a 22-year-old, gainfully employed union worker. I was living in a van and living in debt. And yes, I did start to grow the slightest amount of facial hair.